Mikey, Buddha, and William Walker.
I don't drink soda.
One of these for the movies. All right. And we are here yet again at the Natural Habitat Podcast. Hello, my friend. Awesome Ty joining me. How are you?
I'm fantastic. How are you?
Blah, blah, blah. Good.
Yep.
All right. That's enough of that. Today is an extra-sode, I think. I think that we're just going to we're touching knees under there.
Extra-sode.
That is the theme song for the extra-sode. Thank you for playing that.
Thanks. You're welcome.
Hold on. Here. You take over. I'll be right back.
Okay. So, you guys like stuff?
You barely
You're
talked
back.
that whole time.
You're
I told
back.
you to
Hey.
take over. And you were like, oh, yeah,
I held it
okay.
down. I held it down.
I'm glad. We are just here in the studio. We got new microphones, which is pretty much the whole point of this. Plus, the video failed on the last episode that we did. It cut out halfway through. So I'm trying a new thing with a new camera, and this is pretty much just a test episode.
New camera and new microphones. New shoes.
New shoes. You ever watch Twin Peaks?
No.
All right. Well, I started getting down on the old seasons of Twin Peaks because the new season came out recently.
Yeah, it was just too weird for me.
Very weird. David Lynch is a strange guy, and I watched the old seasons, and there's this character Leo who gets put into a coma, and he's talking to his wife through this coma, and all that he could say is, "New shoes, new shoes." And
I like it.
And it's something about like he had a new pair of shoes, and there was money stashed in the sole or something like that, and he was trying to tell her that it was there, but just new shoes. I say it all the time, and that's why.
New shoes. Everybody likes new shoes.
New shoes. So these microphones definitely sound different. They look different.
They look
Gold? Is that the word you're looking for?
part of it is gold, yeah. Do you think that's real gold, perhaps?
It might be. I know that underneath this popper stopper right here that you're talking into, solid gold.
I mean, that doesn't seem very cost effective, but you know what? We spare no expense over here at the Rogue Media studio.
That's right. I'm sure there's a lot of other things that we could put that money into, but instead, it's gold.
Yeah, that's how we do it.
I'm going to turn these levels down a little bit, just so that I can have room to play with them in post. This is also kind of a test episode.
Yeah, it's a sound check, would you say?
Yeah, this is one giant sound check.
Yep.
And we are here with a topic and with phones. We both have phones. And that topic is podcasts. We're getting meta on this episode.
Yeah, we're going to do a podcast about podcasts.
Whoa. Have you ever heard of anything like that? Yeah, I know.
Your mind's blown.
I know, right?
Your mind's blown.
Hold on. I need a second to recover from this.
Now, do you think that we should take it one step further and in the future do a podcast about podcasts? About podcasts. That's Inception level podcasting right there.
I love that. And find a bunch of other podcasts of people talking about podcasts and talk about their episodes and critique them and bring up their stats. A new thing that I found is socialblade.com. Have I told you about this?
No.
You can go to socialblade.com and you could type in anybody's YouTube channel and it'll tell you how many plays, their subscriber gain and loss over the past weeks, how much revenue they make. And sometimes it makes you angry. You know, you'll go to if you put in, your Jake Paul or Logan Paul, you're going to get very upset at the money that they're making.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of people that, people that I know personally or people that I know through these, certain connections or online that are like making moves, finally at it, PH Hustle or whatever, you know what I mean? And you go and you type in their thing and they're making like 12 cents a month and bragging about all this huge revenue that they have coming in. So it's a lot of fun to check that out. I forget why I got into this.
Yeah, I don't know. Something about podcasts?
Oh, yeah. We're going to take podcasts of people talking about podcasts, and we're going to check out their stats and their revenue and put them on blast. That's what we're going to do.
You're them out to dry.
Mm-hmm. So, I have some recent podcast stats, which, to say the least, were shocking.
Stats is short for statistics.
That's very, very true. Good job, Ty. Stats are short for statistics, and these are some 2018 first quarter podcast stats. So, first of all, just on Apple Podcasts, which used to be known as iTunes, how many podcasts would you say are currently active right now out there in the world with new episodes coming out, say, within the past month?
1 million.
That is very close. It's actually double, so it's not that close. But it's 500,000 active podcasts. So you shot a little high. But still an outstanding number. With 100 different languages. So that makes me think our podcast is only in one language. So we need to switch it up. You know, I see you looking at me like we're about to speak French.
See.
I see. So I found out that a couple years ago when we did, I want to say it was like the 200th episode or something of this podcast, we went through and we looked at a bunch of stats and found out that 22% of Americans even knew what a podcast was. This was like a couple years ago. And remember when you used to tell people about podcasts and they'd be like, what? And you'd have to be like, it's like the radio on the internet.
Yeah.
You don't say that anymore. It's like you don't have to say www before a website.
It's more or less becoming common knowledge what a podcast is.
Now we're up to like 64% of people know what podcasts are.
Right.
Which it should be everybody at this point. My chair's rolling.
A lot
away.
of people think you have to pay for them, or just naturally assume that in some way, shape, or form they're going to have to pay, and that they automatically, aren't going to bother with it. I think.
Yeah, and
because people are cheap.
Very true. Very true.
Very cheap.
I mean, you have all these other things that you're paying for. So what is it to throw $0 at something? Exactly. Even though a lot of my favorite podcasts are now becoming, they're like building paywalls, literally building.
Yeah.
They had 7 different like designs of paywalls.
You've got Donald Trump out here talking about building these walls, and it's just inspiring our favorite podcasts to hide their podcasts behind these walls. Just like Trump's trying to hide, American citizenship away behind these walls.
Yeah, I think he's trying to hide the wonderment and the appeal of Mexico, which is, as we know, a beautiful and amazing country.
There's just too many walls, and if I could quote President Reagan, Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
Tear down this wall. Reagan smash. He punched that wall down, I heard.
He knocked it right the fuck down.
Yeah, he did.
He came over there with a sledgehammer. This is actually, common knowledge. There's historical footage of this. Getty Images was there on hand with photographers. But he took a sledgehammer, and he was the first one that started smashing down that Berlin Wall to separate North Germany from South Germany.
I actually heard that when Getty Images goes and takes pictures of things, that they have a lens cover that they put over their camera that has the watermark on it.
Yeah, they don't do that in post.
No, they take a picture like that, and then they take it out real quick and snap an identical picture, which is the one that you'll buy, which is going to be happening a few seconds after the first one. So it might not be exactly what they captured, but they're good at what they do, and they know how to brand. So this episode is, as always, brought to you by Getty Images. Get access to hundreds of thousands of images, stock photos, GIFs, short videos, and long videos. I don't know why I separated those into two different groups.
Stop stealing your images, you greedy pieces of shit.
Mm-hmm. You know, I found out that we could get access to this huge, like licensed music for videos and background and stuff for like $100 a year. We can get just all kinds of crazy music that's all copywritten, but we'll have the license to use. And I've been thinking about looking into it instead of using that royalty-free Kevin MacLeod.
On my podcast, I just steal.
Oh, you do?
I just blatantly steal.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm not receiving any sort of monetization on there. I don't even think anybody listens to that podcast. So, I mean, what's the harm it's going to cause?
Yeah, it's really just kind of for us.
I see no problem with it.
Yeah. So, with that, that's fine. If you ever want to put those on YouTube, then it's good to have two cuts of it because we have the original cut and then the edited cut.
That's true. Although I don't think that with all the talking over the licensed music, I think that would throw off YouTube's ability to automatically flag it. Yeah,
you're right. But you do tend to sing a lot, and that is a cover. So that would technically be a cover.
True that.
I might have covered The Thunder Rolls at one point on your podcast.
Oh, you definitely did. There was no might.
Yeah, so Garth Brooks would have been coming for me.
Possibly Chris Gaines.
Yeah, I don't know. We'll find out when that happens. But I have a little breakdown just to show the growth because right now we're at let me pull this up. In 2008, 9% of Americans knew what a podcast was. 9%. That's literally nobody. 9% is...
It's hardly... I mean, that's just a sliver of the public.
Yeah, I mean, those people... 9%. We could lose 9% of the population in a plane crash, and we'll all be fine.
In one single plane, yeah.
One plane, yeah. I understand numbers. But in 2013, that went up to 12%. 2015, 17%. And now we're at 64%, which is huge exponential growth. Everybody knows what's up. 44% of people have listened to podcasts, and 49% of podcasts listening is done where? Where do you think that half of podcast listening is done? Because this one shocked me. I was shocked.
I would believe it to be on your daily commute.
See, that's what I thought.
Or possibly at work.
That is also what I thought. But it's at home. 49% of podcast listening is done at home. And I don't listen to any podcast at home.
That's interesting. Yeah, I rarely listen to I mean, every once in a while, but very rarely.
Yeah.
You know what is interesting to me is that more and more people are turning to podcasts as a form of their daily news. Like if you look at the Apple podcast charts right now, or just any time, consistently, the New York Times Daily Podcast is in the top 5 of all of their podcasts.
Yeah.
That's all expanding all categories.
Yeah, a lot of people do get their... I mean, I get my news from podcasts, and it's a lot easier to, find something that is geared more towards you, your interests, your beliefs,
right. Yeah.
Instead of, being fed the left and the right over and over again by CNN and Fox. You can find your own.
Yeah, you can find someone that caters directly to whatever crazy conspiracy theories you believe in.
Yeah, exactly. And then just set that foundation in stone and be like, I'm not the only one out here.
Yeah, you put yourself in an echo chamber where your own thoughts are just constantly echoed.
Mm-hmm. That's what happens with Facebook. I was reading something about the Facebook algorithm. Like one of the recent ones that they did a few months ago was that it would give you more posts that you were more likely to agree with and are about things that you post about or things that you share and things that you like. And then it'll filter out opposing views.
See, I already did that myself manually by unfollowing everybody that didn't agree with me in the 2016 election.
Yeah, that's kind of the way to do it.
I mean, that campaign season really weeded out my friends list.
Yeah, it did. It really...
That really got ugly. I mean, even from the primaries on, I mean, going all the way back to, Bernie Sanders, like, it got ugly. I lost a lot of internet friends.
Yeah, it was a very racist time on Facebook. A lot of people,
a
lot of people were like, people that I knew, people that I talked to all the time, people that I was friends with would just be like, you know what? This is what I think. And then just post the most like ignorant, horrible thing and be like, I'm voting for Trump because of that. Wait, is that what we're talking about? Right.
More or less.
And, like I had fun with the whole thing. If I'm going to be honest, there's things about Trump that are extremely amusing if I take out the fact that he's the president of our country. If I don't think about that part, then I'm like, oh man, this guy's killing it. That was hella funny. This is hella cool.
Right.
I'll tell these motherfuckers, you got a 25% tax. Look here, motherfucker. When he said that shit about China, that was hella cool.
I'll give credit where credit's due when he does something, significant or beneficiary to the country. But
I did my taxes this year,
and
there was no fee for not having health insurance.
Yeah, that's gone.
They
changed the tax brackets up to where they take a little bit less out of each of our checks in our typical tax bracket.
But then I'll be like, oh.
But then you look at all the shit they're slashing. It's like, well, I mean, maybe I'm in the minority, but typically, I mean, for most things, I'd rather pay a little bit more in taxes and have these social programs, especially education. Like I would much granted, even more so now that I have a child on the way, but I would definitely rather pay more in taxes and actually have a decent education system compared to some of the other countries in the world, which, our public school system is just one of, it's like considered like equivalent to like a third world public education system. And for America to have that just seems backwards. I would pay more for everybody to have health insurance, like a universal health care. Like, I mean, I guess I probably am in the minority of that based on how our country is currently voting and the fact that Trump got elected.
Yeah, true. But
this is quickly turning into a political podcast.
It is out of nowhere. But real quick, before we move on from this, he also is selling off like national parks and shit, and closing down a bunch of national parks, selling it to private companies, letting people drill there, build there.
He's basically running America like a corporation. But I mean, that was one of his campaign promises. That's what he said he was going to do.
But he did say motherfucker in that speech, which was really cool. So, I was excited about that, but not blinded by it. But
have you been following how him and Joe Biden are like going back and forth, like talking about how they're gonna fist fight each other, like beat each other's ass?
No, I haven't.
Oh, it's amazing. You should look it up later.
That sounds great. Yeah. I will. Oh shit. But podcasts, which is what we were talking about before it got strangely political. Podcast listeners are loyal, showing that 35% listen to the entire episode and 45% listen to most of the episode. So like 90% at least, and skip the end. So I would say that I'm pretty close to that. I listen to pretty much all the episodes. Let's jump into our favorite podcasts. What are some podcasts that you listen to?
Well, I think we got to look at what's the most popular podcasts, and that seems to be these true crime podcasts where they kind of like break down these crime cases, be it the most popular podcast right now out of all of them is Empire on Blood, which I haven't listened to. I have to check it out, but supposedly it's about some murder that happened in the 90s, and it's more or less kind of like a Making the Murderer Netflix type deal on
Okay.
in podcast form. And then you've got Serial, which is a super famous one. I haven't listened to that one either, but I think it might be something along the same lines.
Yeah.
And these seem to be the most popular podcasts. This American Life,
See,
I think
those
is
are
something like that.
Yeah, Serial and This American Life. Those are like the big ones,
Right.
and those were like the original podcasts. Those are the ones that all the smart, educated people listen to. Is Serial, and I don't think it was This American Life, but it was another podcast that they did that I was listening to that was actually pretty good. But I haven't heard of the true crime one, the number one.
Yeah, the Empire on Blood. I'm going to have to check it out. I naturally want to parody this since it's the hot thing to do.
What else do we have on our list?
So the top 10 podcasts are Empire on Blood is number one. And this, I think it updates like weekly or whatever. So this is always changing. I mean, granted, some of them are consistently in the top, but the Health Code is number two, which the Health Code, I don't know what the fuck that is. It's about health and fitness, I guess. Sounds
right.
pretty boring. Number three is the New York Times Daily. It's that news one. Number four is Serial. Number five is Felonious Florida.
That sounds entertaining.
It sounds like another true crime one about some murders in 1994.
That's felonious.
I'm assuming in Florida. Everything happens in Florida. Number five is Armchair Expert with Dax Shepard. Have you listened to that?
No.
Yeah.
Fucking Dax
I
Shepard.
don't know. It looks like he's just got celebrities on there.
I'm stuck on felonious.
Felonious.
I just keep
yeah.
saying felonious in my head.
And then you got number seven is some sort of TED Talk one.
Okay.
Number eight, Joe Rogan. Everybody knows that
Always
podcast.
in the top 10.
Always, probably. Some NPR Hidden Brain is number nine. NPR is for nerds and geeks and people smarter than you or I. So yeah, it's about science and some guy hosting it named Shankar Vedantam.
Uh-huh.
So, yeah.
Oh, Shankar? Yeah.
Yeah, naturally. And then number 10 is Viral with Natalie Alzate.
Huh.
And it's called hashtag viral.
Oh, hashtag viral.
Hashtag viral.
That's okay.
So,
that makes way more sense.
I'm assuming she's like, your internet influencer type basic, okay guys, we're going to take a deep dive into, owning in your brand and says a lot of buzzwords, shit like that.
Yeah,
You know what
okay.
I mean? Okay, so that's your top 10.
All right. That makes sense.
Now, personally, I really wouldn't listen to any of those.
No.
I mean, I'll check out Empire on Blood because it sounds kind of good and it's the number one podcast. But aside from that, I mean, be honest, I'm not really into any of those. So
See, but it shows that there's a little something for everybody out there.
yeah,
in the
there's podcasts
world.
for every niche. That's the beautiful thing is like, no matter how nerdy what you're into is, there's probably a podcast for it.
It's like we could make a podcast that is literally, this is probably already a thing, but we can make a podcast that is just about the Iron Sheik. And we could go over all of his matches. We can go over all of his Twitter posts, all of his crazy things that he's done.
Yeah, he's done some crazy things. That would actually be a good podcast.
That would be a really good podcast. I would listen to it too.
Should we make
Did
it?
we just start a new podcast? I think we might have. Okay. And so we have to come up with a punny name for it, make sure there's not already a thing. And we could do that podcast and we could find a huge group of fans. 100% of the people in this room would listen to it.
Yeah.
So if you want to hear that happen, let us know.
Yeah, if you want to support an Iron Sheik podcast,
If we get one person to say that they want that podcast, I'll make an episode.
it's doable.
Yeah, absolutely. We could both do it. But with Joe Rogan, I still listen to Joe Rogan, and I listen to it less and less. But that was the podcast that got me into podcasts, and it was because I was on fagolovers.net one day back in the time when that used to be my one of my go-to websites in the morning. I'd go check Fago Lovers and see the news and new music.
It was like your New York Times.
It was my New York Times podcast is what it was. So I would go there and check it out. And one day in the video section, it was like Jim Norton talks about Gathering of the Juggalos on Joe Rogan's podcast. And I was like, I like Jim Norton. He's a crazy guy that bangs transvestites. And I was like, I want to hear what he has to say about the Gathering of the Juggalos. He told some crazy story about him performing there. So I went and watched this video, and it was like scroll to an hour and 24 minutes. So I scrolled through, and I ended up watching this 20-minute chunk of the Joe Rogan podcast. And I was like, what the fuck? Like, this conversation went everywhere. They were talking about all kinds of crazy shit. And then the very next episode after that, I believe, was Mac Lethal. And I was like, oh, that would be cool to listen to. So I subscribed to the podcast, downloaded a podcast app, did the whole thing, listened to the Mac Lethal one, and then it suggested podcasts to me. And one of them was Stuff You Should Know, which I started listening to. So I really owe it to Joe Rogan for kicking off the podcast listening for me. And that kind of opened the door.
See, I kind of listened to podcasts sporadically for a long time. Just when I would hear about one, somehow I would more or less seek it out on whatever host website I had. But then when I got an iPhone and the app was built into my iPhone, and everything was just right there, basically every podcast, I didn't have to like seek it out, some on Soundcloud, some on Podbean, which is more or less what I was doing. Probably was a simpler way on Android, but I just wasn't aware of it. So once I had that app, I would start, seeing all these other podcasts because it was well organized, and I subscribe to probably like 15 different podcasts right now, which I try to keep up on them. I mean, I don't always listen to every episode, but for the most part, I have a lot of free time at work, so it definitely helps, fill that.
Yeah. All right. Well, what I want to do real quick is we'll go through. We don't have to do all of them. We could skip some, but just the ones that you listen to regularly or that you really enjoy, podcasts that you subscribe to.
Word. That
you're currently subscribed to right now.
Word.
So we're going in alphabetical order, I assume. Is that how yours is set up? I don't have an iPhone. I'm Team Android over here.
Yeah, we can go however.
All right. First one, Analyze Fish, which is a great podcast with Scott Aukerman from Comedy Bang Bang, which I'll get to in a minute. And then Harris Whittles, who is a writer for Parks and Rec and a bunch of other things. And Harris Whittles is a super extreme Fish fan, the band Fish. And Scott hates Fish. So the whole podcast is Harris trying to convince Scott that Fish is just a good band. Not to like them, but just that they're like, that they're a decent band. It's called Analyze Fish. Like, analyze this. And,
go ahead and subscribe to that.
And they at one point they do drugs and go to a Fish show and record the whole experience. But Harris Whittles, he actually overdosed and died. And
shit.
He's not with us anymore.
So that podcast is not being updated.
It is not, but he is a comedic genius. And they used to just do episodes it'll be 7 years ago, 6 years ago, 6 years ago, 4 years ago. They just take huge breaks and just did it whenever. So that's a great show.
Yeah, I'm actually just subscribed to that, so I'm gonna check that out. If we're going alphabetical order, Awesome Ty is running for mayor. It's a pretty underground podcast. I would say probably averages anywhere between 100,000, 200,000 weekly listeners. You may have heard of the guy. Awesome Ty is a 2018 Paso Robles, California mayoral candidate. He's actually running for mayor with little or no experience in government or work history in politics.
Yeah.
So that's a good podcast.
I'm gonna have to check that out.
Yeah.
Next I have that also. And then I have the Burtcast, which is Burt Kreischer. He's actually the guy who Van Wilder is based off of. Rolling Stone did a story about the biggest party schools, chose his school, which I think was in Florida. And then he was the number one party guy, and they followed him around, wrote this article about him, and then they made Van Wilder based on that article. But he's just some old dude now that's super lovable, has a family, is a comedian, and he's just like he's a real positive dude. His laugh is like really goofy, and he's just like it's a feel good podcast. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It makes me feel good when I listen to Bert Kreischer's podcast.
That's sweet. Yeah.
So Bertcast.
Next I got Bunny Ears, which is a podcast I just stumbled on the other day. I told you about. It's got Macaulay Culkin and his friend, who's like a comedian. I don't really know much about the friend. He's a funny guy though.
Yeah,
and he's a good moderator.
Matt Cohen, I think.
Yeah. I found when you have like a podcast with like a known celebrity like Macaulay Culkin, who's had like a really interesting life. There's a lot of podcasts out there like this, and you know, the biggest factor almost is whether or not that moderator, that second guy, is asking the right questions. And more or less, I feel like Matt, the guy that's, doing the podcast with him, asks some good questions, makes fun of him an appropriate amount, and is more or less, a pretty good moderator for that. But Macaulay Culkin, I mean, shit, he's had an interesting life, from Home Alone to whatever it is he does now, but he's like a pretty down to earth guy. You know what I mean? Like I would have always assumed, based on how you see him portrayed in the media. Granted, it's not very often these days, but they kind of portray him as like I always thought he was like a heroin addict, but like kind of like a super hipster, recluse, just kind of a weirdo, more or less. And
like long, greasy hair.
Yeah.
Punker clothes.
You see him now and you hear him on this podcast, and like he's not too much different from you or I, you know what I mean? He's just like a dude in his early 30s who likes a lot of the same shit that we do, who's probably into a lot of the same shit at the same time because he's right in our age, and he's got some interesting stories to tell. So it's a pretty funny podcast.
Yeah, I checked out the first episode of that and I liked it a lot. So Bunny Ears is dope. Next, I have Comedy Bang Bang, which the aforementioned Scott Aukerman. I saw Comedy Bang Bang, the TV show, on Netflix, and I saw Reggie Watts was like the band leader on it. And I had just gotten into Reggie Watts' videos, and he does like the Crazy Looper and like Talkbox stuff and all kinds of crazy live on the spot shit. So I was like, hey, I know that guy, it's Reggie Watts. So I clicked it and started watching it. And I stumbled across this like weird comedy like talk show. So it's like a talk show, but it's scripted and edited together, but presented like a live talk show. You know what I'm saying? So it'd be like if you think like Jimmy Fallon or Jimmy Kimmel live, and how everything's happening then, and they're just cutting from camera to camera, but everything's all edited together and professional. And he has like a lot of really good comedians on there. And it said in the description, based on the hit podcast, Comedy Bang Bang. So I looked up the podcast and went back into the archive and started listening to it. There's hundreds of episodes, all kinds of, it's like the very first episode had Rob Hubel on it, which is, yeah. And so everyone's funny. Everyone's, someone that I want to listen to. And he'll always have a real guest and then another guest that's playing a character.
Oh, that sounds...
So it's like a real celebrity with another celebrity that's a character of someone.
That's pretty tight.
Yeah, and it gets really messy. So it's a strange like improv style show.
I kind of like that. Like the idea of it.
But I got really sucked into that, and then they put up a paywall, and it pissed me off.
Yeah, fucking Trump and his walls.
That's right.
So next I got Gilbert Gottfried's Amazing Colossal podcast.
Oh.
Yeah. Gilbert Gottfried, so if you're into hearing the voice of the parrot from Aladdin talk to you for 1 hour a week with some guests. He gets some good guests. He mostly talks about show business and the industry and his career. But he's a pretty funny dude, Gilbert Gottfried.
Yeah.
That's one that I don't keep up with too often. I can only do the ones where it's just like a weekly interview so often because, you're not going to want to hear everybody's story.
Yeah, it's kind of the same thing.
Sometimes you're going to get, your Marion Ross. I don't know who Marion Ross is. I don't want to hear Gilbert Gottfried interview this person.
Next on mine is the H3 podcast, which is H3H3 Productions, Ethan and Hila. Remember I showed you like some of their videos? He did the Jeff Dunham video.
That's a pretty popular podcast too.
Yeah, and they just started. Like I don't know, I want to say like 6 months ago. Let's see when the first episode was. Well, a year ago it says. And Justin Roiland was their first episode. So that's also a good one.
Yeah. Next, I got Everything's Coming Up Simpsons. It's a podcast where two women. I don't really know what their deal is. They're pretty well known because they get some huge guests on the. They get like regularly. They get Simpsons writers and comedians on the guest, but they just break down a different Simpsons episode every episode. And if you're a diehard Simpsons fan, or even somebody that casually likes The Simpsons, you might check it out. If you don't like The Simpsons, you're probably not going to enjoy this podcast because it is very Simpsons related.
But if you like The Simpsons, and Simpsons is one of those things that people grew up with, the trivia is like a really big thing.
Yeah, everybody knows about The Simpsons. Like, even if you can't stand it, you probably know like a handful of characters.
So here's the question. If anybody were to ask me, do you know anybody that's really into The Simpsons? I would say you. You would be my number one go-to. Have you learned things from this podcast?
Not a ton of things because like I am really into The Simpsons. So like I listen to like the DVD commentaries and shit. So a lot of the little tidbits that they do
You've already got the original.
They're almost regurgitating. Like I can tell that they're almost regurgitating directly from the DVD commentary and almost trying to pass it off like, oh, we have all this insider knowledge. It's like, no, you don't. You just listen to the DVD commentaries like any other Simpsons nerd. But they do. They get some like Paul Scheer was just on there.
Yeah.
They get like old Simpsons writers all the time. So I mean, they get some pretty good guests and they're funny. So it's a good show.
Nice.
I like how they'll dissect like what was a 3-second joke on The Simpsons for 15 minutes and just break down its genius. And if you're like a nerd like I am, it's something enjoyable.
Yeah, for a Simpsons fan or a comedy fan.
Right.
That sounds dope.
Yes.
Speaking of comedy fans, next on my list is Kill Tony, which is hosted by Tony Hinchcliffe. He's the number one young rising comedian in the world.
Number uno.
And it's also the number one live streamed podcast in the world. These are both self-proclaimed by Tony on every episode. No one's ever proven it to be true, but nonetheless, that's a thing. And it's recorded at the Comedy Store in LA. And what it is they have like a hat. Comedians put their name in the hat and they pull their name. If your name gets pulled, you get to do 60 seconds of comedy on stage, and it'll be Tony and then like a panel of guests. You do your 60 seconds of comedy and then everybody makes fun of you and just kind of puts you down, makes you feel like your dreams are worthless and then tell you to keep at it and then you leave. But a lot of crazy shit has happened in that show. Like a lot of fights, a lot of like crazy arguments, and Tony's just ruthless and literal. I've seen some dreams get crushed on that show for sure. But I've also heard a lot of really good comedians that are just starting out, people that have just moved to LA that are like, oh, I moved here 3 weeks ago and just did a great set. They have this new regular that does a new minute every week. His name's Malcolm, and he has one name like Madonna. And he could be like a really big comedian one day. And I'm listening to him before anybody knows who he is. So it's almost like that Comedy Insider thing. You're at the Comedy Store, which is the belly of the beast, where all the new comedians come out of. So all your favorite comedians started there. So you're listening to like the new batch. Yeah,
I've noticed that me and you predominantly listen to comedy podcasts.
Yeah. I think so.
I listen to some sports podcasts too, which I'm not going to get into because they're just kind of niche and directly related to the sports I watch. But another comedy one that I like is Hannibal Buress, Handsome Rambler, and that's he more or less records it like on his comedy tours. So like in each place or in each podcast, he's more or less in like a different city, and he'll get into what's going on in the cities and what he's doing. And he usually has guests. I don't listen to that one as much because it's guest based too. So the ones that are guest based more or less. But Hannibal Buress is a funny guy. He's one of my favorite comedians. So that one's good.
Yeah, he's a funny dude for sure.
Yeah.
Next, I have a twofer, and that is first. Are you talking U2 to me? And second is, are you talking REM re-me? And these are both podcasts that are hosted by Scott Ackerman from Comedy Bang Bang.
He's got a ton of podcasts.
He does. Well, he like runs Earwolf, which is a podcast network, or he's like really high up in there somewhere. But it's him and then Adam Scott of Parks and Rec and a bunch of other things.
Yeah.
And they both are fans of U2, and they did this whole show where they went through all of U2's albums. So the name of every episode was a U2 album, and they talked about the time in their career and blah, blah, blah. But they're both funny, so it's really barely about U2. But at the end of that podcast, the running of it, they went to a U2 show, got backstage, and recorded a podcast with Bono. And then they were like, we're done. Podcast is over.
It's fantastic.
So now they're doing it again with REM.
That's pretty sweet.
So that's pretty good.
The premise. I got another Earwolf one. How did this get made?
Yeah, that's
with,
good.
Paul Scheer and an assortment of
Jason Mantzoukas.
Yeah, Mantzoukas is on there regularly, and they got various guests, and that's where they break down each week a different terrible movie. And basically try to determine how exactly that got the go ahead to get made.
Yeah. That's a really good.
Yeah, it's a long running one. It's been around for a while too. Lots and lots of movies they've covered.
I used to listen to Star Talk Radio a lot, and I kind of fell off of that because I feel like Neil deGrasse Tyson is just becoming more of a whore.
He kind of is, yeah,
and less of like conduit of information.
Right. Yeah.
He used to blow my mind every time he talked. And now he kind of just recycles the same things and tries to push his own stuff.
I mean, he's out rubbing elbows and hobnobbing with these celebrities all the time. He's not hitting the books, and there's new scientific gains to be made.
Yeah, he doesn't even know what Steve Martin he's talking to.
He doesn't.
Yeah, so.
Yeah, so sorry, Neil deGrasse Tyson, you did not make the list. Better luck next year.
All right, I'm almost. I mean, I skipped a few, but I'm getting towards the end of my list. You got any more you want to bring up?
Yeah, Something to Wrestle with Bruce Pritchard's a good one. If you like pro wrestling, or even if you just like crazy stories. Bruce Pritchard was like Vince McMahon's assistant, like basically like right-hand man for like the better part of 30 years. He eventually got fired like a few years back, but I mean, he was right there for basically everything that ever happened in professional wrestling, and he has like the behind-the-scenes scoop on it. And he's that's another podcast where he's got a really good moderator that just asks some hard-hitting questions, doesn't let him dodge any questions. The moderator calls him on bullshit if he smells bullshit. So it's a really good podcast. It became super like mainstream. Like it's consistently one of the top sports podcasts. So it's just a good show, even if you don't like wrestling. I like
that sounds pretty sick. I'm gonna check it out.
Yeah, it is good. And they have it's each week's a different topic in wrestling, so you can just kind of go through and like if there's something you were fascinated by, like say like the Ultimate Warrior or WrestleMania 5 or whatever, chances are there's a particular episode for it.
And what was that one called again?
Something to Wrestle.
Something to Wrestle.
And then also Yeah, But Still. It's just a podcast that got started by a couple of Instagram accounts that I followed, and it's pretty funny. And yeah, I would recommend listening to that. Definitely check out the newest episode. It's called Cool Cat, something Cool Cat.
Cool Cat.
Cool Cat finds a gun. And they just, yeah. I mean, I really can't describe this podcast other than it's a couple of like, Instagram hipsters who are pretty funny. They both have funny Instagram accounts, but they do a podcast where they're more or less, they talk a lot about like the LA party scene, which is kind of annoying because, if you're not part of the LA party scene, what the fuck do you really care about it? Yeah. But then when they have like a good topic, like this Cool Cat one, or they talked about like, how the guy that, started Minecraft is like become like this alt-right troll on Twitter or whatever. When they have a good topic, it's a really, really funny podcast.
Yeah, I subscribe to it and I'll listen to it every once in a while.
Yeah, you got to check out the Cool Cat one.
Yeah, I need to.
And then go down the Cool Cat. Like, we could do a whole episode on Cool Cat, except for the fact they just did one, so.
And then my last one I'll throw out here is the Doug Stanhope podcast, previously known as the Shot Clog podcast or something like that. But Doug Stanhope from the rebranding of The Man Show.
Yeah, that's where I remember him from.
Yeah.
I know he does stand-up.
Yeah, and he does stand-up too.
I best remember him from was The Man Show rebrand.
And his stand-up is really good. And he did one that was on a dead network now, CISO, which was like an online comedy, like a Netflix for comedy kind of thing.
Right.
And there was a lot of really good specials that came out on there that are now gone. I don't even think you can get them anymore. They did Andy Richter, you know Andy Richter from the Conan show? They did Andy Richter's Christmas special where he did it was like a live performance, like a play kind of thing on like a set and everything. And there was all kinds of hella funny people in it, and he did this whole dysfunctional family Christmas thing. And it just made me love him even more. But they went under, and now you can't even get these specials. But Doug Stanhope killed it on there. He lives on some compound in the middle of the desert in Arizona, in some small town that he's taken over, much like the Rajneeshpuram. And he goes into town, and all of his fans come to his shows. And he's extremely dysfunctional, just constantly drinking, constantly doing drugs, open about everything. And I know that his mom died, not super recently, but like within the past 5 or 10 years, his mom died. And he wrote a book about it, and he helped her, he like Kevorkianed her with like alcohol and pills and shit. Like he helped her die because she wanted to die. And I want to say they did it like at home and not at a doctor. And it was like super crazy. So he like killed his mom and fucking.
Wow, that's got to weigh heavy on your conscience.
Yeah, but I don't think he has one of those. When you listen to the podcast. Well,
I don't know. That could be, why he's doing all those drugs.
Very true, to kind of numb all that.
To numb all that pain. I bet you deep down, he bottles it up. And
I think he does. Because he'll talk about it and he'll be like, sometimes when I take a couple days off of drinking or I don't have my Xanax because I flew to some other country to do a show, that he gets like all sad and mopey and like depressed and shit. So that's definitely what it is. But what I love the most about a show is the honesty, the brutal honesty, the shit that people keep hidden in life. He has it forefront right there, laid out for everyone to see. And there's always something in that pile that's relatable to your own demons. You know what I mean?
Now, if you could have or force anybody to have a podcast that doesn't currently have a podcast, who would it be?
That's tough. I'd say Michelle Obama, 100%.
Michelle Obama, huh? Okay.
Mm-hmm. Michelle Obama, I want her to have a podcast that talks about all the inner workings of the White House and things that she found out while she was First Lady. And she'll interview a bunch of other First Ladies and daughters of dead First Ladies and stuff like that. And get all these internal scoops. And it'll be all about like empowerment of women, how women were in charge the whole time. And plagiarism will also be a sidebar.
Oh, I like it.
What's your answer?
So this just came to me. I haven't put any much thought into this before, a couple seconds ago, but
I've been thinking about mine for a long time.
What if he went with Pauly Shore doing his Weasel character, Andrew Dice Clay doing his Andrew Dice Clay character,
add to the Dice Man,
and then like a straight man moderator has to sit there and like try to make some sort of podcast out of all of this. Preferably one that's like clearly not enthused about the whole concept.
That's just struggling to make it through.
Yeah,
that's great.
That would be fucking awesome. I'd listen to that,
dude. That would be.
I mean, like, what the. Like, first of all, like, why are these two characters coming together?
Yeah, both of them are not real people. They're both characters.
Yeah.
Together in some sort of weird melding of universes, and then a third person. That's
it would be
not
almost and it would almost be awesome if like the third person was like a millennial who wasn't familiar with their
didn't get any of the references at all. It was just like, why are you old people doing this? And then just pay. The whole thing is that they're just getting paid to do it, so they need the money. That's a great idea.
Oh man, we could almost pitch that somewhere.
Dude, we came up with 2 podcasts today.
Shit.
Yeah, we just need to learn how to do Dice and Weasel voices, and we're set. We get someone else to join us and be the moderator, and it's over. But we need someone that's real good at the straight man, deadpan.
Yeah, for sure. That would really be funny.
Yeah, that would. What was the first idea? I forgot it already.
I don't remember either.
Oh no! Luckily, it's in the podcast.
This Weasel and Dice idea just kind of snowballed.
Yeah, it did, and it took everything else with it.
It took on a life of its own.
It took the creativity from the first idea and sucked it into the snowball. Yeah. That's how snowballs work. It rolled it over. What was that game? You remember that game that was on, like, I want to say PlayStation, and you would start as like a little ball, and you would roll them, and you would pick things up, and then you would get bigger and bigger, and then start picking up bigger and bigger things until you picked up all the planets?
Oh, yeah, I don't remember that at all.
That was crazy. Like, you started super tiny and picked up like a grain of sand, and then like it turned into thumbtacks and like pennies and shit.
That sounds pretty sweet.
And then you were picking up couches, and it was like some crazy Japanese game. But I remember the music gave people seizures. So it wasn't even like, you know how usually it's the light and the flashing that gives people seizures. It was the weird music that did it.
Really?
And
what kind of music was it? Was it like 8-bit style video game music, or, I mean, I've never heard of any music giving people seizures aside from maybe like.
I wonder if we could find it. I'm gonna fucking Google this. Super weird game where you roll and pick everything up. Is that how you would Google that? It's called Katamari Damacy.
So it's a foreign game.
Yeah, it's Japanese, I said.
Oh.
Japanese. Let's, I don't know if this is going to work. This is just coming out of this guy's thing. We won't be able to play the music on the podcast. Why is this guy talking like this?
He's Dr. Henry Oswald. Do you think he's really a doctor?
Possibly. A lot of people are taking on the doctor title. Do you think... I mean, there's Dr. Disrespect, avid Twitch streamer.
Do you think he's a doctor?
I don't think so. I know that he's two-time... he's the two-time.
Now, call me old-fashioned, but I don't believe you should be taking the title doctor unless you put in the work to get a doctorate.
Yeah, I agree. But Dr. Disrespect is the two-time, and he did win the 1993-1994 Blockbuster Video Game World Championship. So I think that's kind of on par with getting your doctorate. That's pretty impressive.
Sure. Yeah, I'll give him that.
That video wouldn't play. I'm just going to pull it up on here. We really need to upgrade the internet in the studio. What was that game called? Katamari something? Yeah. Katamari Democry soundtrack. Let's see.
This is the seizure music? Oh yeah, it's just really bad EDM. I don't care for that at all. I gotta say.
But you see how it could be kind of seizure inducing,
yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so that's definitely strange. But
now I don't know if it has anything to do with the music that you just played, but possibly coincidentally, right then and there, like I got the urge to evacuate my bowels.
Really?
To be as not gross as possible.
You know what? I kind of have a little bit of stomach churning as well.
Yeah,
maybe there's a brown note in there.
I mean, I don't know, but it's probably a coincidence, most likely. But
it seems like a great time to end the show.
Yeah, I gotta go home. I gotta go poop.
All right. Well, thank you for joining me, Ty. Hopefully that's still recording over there. You never know until we go check it out. And we'll see you guys next time.